I don't have any videos. I don't even have PowerPoint. I don't have a bed and breakfast to promote either. Um, but I'm going to tell you about the easiest job in the world, and that's storytelling. And it's easy because a 10-year-old boy can do it. And that's how I started. I was 10 years old. I was in school, and we had a class about newspapers. And we got to interview the mayor. We got to interview soccer players. We got to ask all our questions we wanted to ask to those people and just write them down. And that's when I decided, oh, that's a good job. You just go to see people, you ask them questions, and you write it down. And that's how you can make a living. So I did that when I was 10 years old, and I decided that's what I wanted to do, and I still do it. And I want to know, there's a lot of journalism students here in the room. I want to know, has anyone who is on Twitter, on Facebook, ever asked a question to a journalist? Who did that? They're over there, but they don't ask questions on Twitter to journalists? You know, if you ask a question, you can get a reply or you cannot get a reply, but you can also tell something about yourself by asking that question, and which can help the journalist. I was a couple of weeks, or maybe it's already 2 months ago, before the first round of the presidential elections in France. I was in Toulouse. I went to Toulouse on a Monday morning because some young children were shot at a Jewish school, and there had been some murders before. So I was there. Of course, I was not there alone. I was not the only one telling the story about Toulouse. I was tweeting. I was standing in front of the house of the man who was the killer, and there was a siege of the house, and I was just tweeting because my story was not, or that story was not, I was not the only one to tell that story. I could just go on Twitter. Lots of people were following me, and they were asking questions as well. I got questions from people in the Netherlands, questions from the people in Belgium, questions from people in France who follow me on Twitter as well. And the Dutch people who follow me, they asked, is he really dead? Why took it so long until they found that guy and they shot him in the house? Why did? Because there was a siege for more than a day. It was almost, I think, 36 hours until they killed him. French people were asking, what will this do to Toulouse? How will people react in the banlieue, in Paris? Will Marine Le Pen win at the elections now? Because people will think we have here some crazy guy who shoots at Jewish children. So will that change politics? That tells a lot about the people asking questions and what is their background, what kind of questions are they asking. It could help me to write my story afterwards, because I went into the banlieue and I tried to find people who knew this guy who was called Mohamed Merah. Sorry. And I tried to find the answers to the questions people asked me. Tjorven this morning, for the people who were here already this morning, talked about blanks in stories. People had blanks in the story about Mohamed Merah, things they saw on television but they didn't understand, or things they heard on the radio. They see tweets of 140 characters, but they still have lots of questions. I try to fill in the blanks because for Tjorven it might be good that he has blanks in his stories. If you have that as a journalist, that's more difficult. So if you tell a story, if you don't know it, don't write it. If you don't know it, go ask the questions, try to reply to the questions people ask you. So that was very much helping me, and it also helped me understood that French people had completely other questions than Dutch people, and it's because they live in a different context. The Dutch people were very analytical, very theoretical, and France people are very philosophical and political. And that's the kind of question they ask as well. I thought afterwards probably it's because French students, they all have to get a philosophically class at school. They have to write a paper about a philosopher. We don't do that in Belgium. People in Holland don't do that. So they don't have that background, and they don't ask those kind of questions to people who are on the spot. You could say that it was just only for that story that people were asking that questions, but a year of those kind of questions. But a year before, one of the first things I had to do while I was a Paris correspondent was writing about the arrest of Dominique Strauss Kahn. That was in New York, but of course it was a big story in France as well. Thank you, Sarah. And you could see as well that there people asked other questions or had other opinions about it. People in Holland, and at the news desk where I work, people were asking, couldn't this have been prevented? Huh? He had his background at the DSK. He was known that he had a problem with women, that he had a kind of behavior. Couldn't this have been prevented? In France, the reactions were, at first, they arrested our DSK. And they were very thinking that France is a liberal country, and we behave a little bit different. We are not so Puritan as the Americans. So you saw that in Holland, they reacted a little bit like the Anglo-Saxons would do, and say this is not something you can do. In France, they thought, well, maybe he was trapped, maybe there's another story behind it, maybe it's political because someone didn't want him to join the elections because he would have been the presidential candidate for the Socialist Party if he wouldn't have been arrested there in New York City. Afterwards, I must say that the French got introspective as well, and they were a little bit ashamed for not only for what happened, but also for their first reaction. And but that was very philosophical again. They were not asking much, have we reacted wrong, or the Americans right, but they were trying to know where their reaction came from. Why do they behave like they behave? And that was a very philosophical, political thing to do again. That can help me to write stories as well. If you see, and that's a tip I want to give to everyone. If you write a story, try to understand the context and go on social media, not only those here in Kortrijk or the Belgian websites, but try to be, try to go to the first sources, try to find French websites if you do something about France, but also nothing beats the man on the spot. So try to go somewhere. I couldn't have done my stories from Toulouse in Paris, because I wouldn't have been able to talk to the people, to ask questions to the local people there if I get stuck behind a desk and a computer in Paris. I had to go there to make those stories and to try to find the answers that people were asking me on the phone, or in this case via Twitter as well. The introspective that, or the introspection that the French people had after the DSK thing is already gone again, because in France, media are very political as well. It's not only a very political society, but media are much more political than the Flemish newspapers or the Dutch newspapers. Now, in this presidential election, during the second round or just before the second round, there are still newspapers who say, you should vote for Sarkozy, or you should vote for Hollande. There's a right-wing newspaper, Le Figaro, that says, Sarkozy is our man, you should vote for him. Libération, the left-wing newspaper, says, Holland, now it's time for change. That's literally the slogan of the Socialist Party. You should vote for him. If the newspaper I work for would do that, we would lose half of our readers, I think, because they don't want that. They don't want a newspaper to tell you who to vote for. They want to be informed. They want to know what the differences are between the candidates. But they don't want you to tell, this is our man, you should vote for him. It doesn't work that way. In France, you can easily do that. I don't think that in Belgium you can do that anymore. It was like that in the 50s or the 60s, but not anymore. And France is still a very political country, and there's a lot of media and politics are very entwined. A journalist can easily become spokesperson for a political person or for a company, and then go back to journalism. Or there's lots of politicians who are married or have an affair with journalists. You can't do that in Holland. If you do that in Holland, then you have to find another job. And mostly it's the journalist who has to find another job and not the politician who has to find another job. But now, the wife of the new, well, it's not his wife, it's his girlfriend of the new French president. She just works for Paris Match, and that's a very popular news magazine. It's not a gossip magazine, it's between gossip and news. And she discovered she was on the front of her same magazine, the magazine she works for, as the charming companion of Mr. Hollande. And, but she didn't know anything about it. But she was used as a part in the media campaign just to, and because she has a relation with François Hollande. I'm telling this because it's important to know the context. If you write a story about French politics or even about French society, that you know these kind of things and that you can discover them not only on the web but also by being there. I want to stress that it's important to try to know your languages, even if it's only a little bit. But French people, for instance, can be very suspicious if you don't speak a word of French and you go to them and you have to try to ask something in English, but probably they won't understand you. So it's important to know your languages, even if you're a local reporter here in Kortrijk. At a certain point, you have to write a story about border politics or about thieves coming from the north of France and coming into Belgium, or Belgian thieves going to the north of France, and that kind of story. So you have to know your French. The same goes for sports journalism. If you want to write about soccer, you have to know English, but it can help you to know a little bit of Spanish as well. If you write about cycling, it can come in handy to know some Italian, for instance, because a lot of cycling teams are Italian. The last thing I want to do is just give some small tips, and these are things that I learned along the way, when I've been working in journalism for 20 years. It works for me, it might not work for you, but I just give them as some kind of tips. If you tell a story, if you write a story for a newspaper or a magazine, don't look at your notes. Just imagine that you're in a bar and you have to tell the story to your friends. Or imagine that the neighbor is coming in, and you have to tell, and they ask, oh, how has been your day? And then you just tell your day. That way, you have to keep it exciting. You'll not think about details that are really details and you don't need them anymore. The story will come by itself. Don't throw away your notes. Keep them to see if everything you wrote down is correct and if the names are spelled correctly and that kind of thing. But don't look at your notes when you start writing. I always think of an old neighbor of mine, and it was a very normal neighbor. She was not very intelligent, she was not stupid, she was just a normal housewife with 2 kids. And I think if I'm really stuck and I have to explain something that maybe is a little bit different or difficult, I think, how would I tell it to Rita? And that sometimes helped me. Also think that people, you know a lot when you have been investigating into a story. You have spoken to different people, you have seen things, you have heard things. You know a lot. People who start reading your article might know nothing. So imagine, I call that, or at the newspaper we call that the Iceland Doctrine. Imagine that people have been on a desert island for 4 weeks and they don't know that François Hollande has been elected president in France. So keep in mind that people don't know everything that you know. Read good stories in magazines or in books or in newspapers. And if you have read a story and you think, oh, that was a good story, try to tell yourself or ask yourself, why did I like this story? Why was this so good written? What was it, the words he used, or was it just the way it was composed? But you can learn a lot. You can learn good journalism from good journalism. So read a lot and try to explain for yourself why it's good. And that's a very personal thing, and I want to end with that. Keep your opinions for yourself. People can have their own opinions, and they will judge whether they agree with what someone says in your story or don't agree with someone in your story. But people are wise enough to have their own opinion, so they don't need your opinion. You or as a storyteller, you tell the story as you see it. That's already subjective because you're at one place and you could not be at the other place. There's always some kind of subjectivism in a story, but don't bother people with your opinions.
Can I ask you a question about that before you conclude? Do you change that voice when you're on Twitter? Do you inject a little bit more of yourself and brand yourself or become your personality with your own opinions?
Sometimes, but I try to keep my tweets as comment-free as possible and very newsy, because I try to be fast, and when something has already happened an hour ago, then I don't tweet about it anymore. Or if I have written a story about it or a blog about it, I make a link to the blog, but I don't, and I don't. There are lots of opinions on the internet, but they're sometimes not based on a lot of facts, and well, that's a personal thing. I don't really like that, because sometimes I read a tweet with someone's opinion, but then I know that he doesn't agree, but I don't know with what he doesn't agree, because he forgot to tell the facts. And that can be hard in 140 characters, I know, but...
Questions? Yeah. Oh, Tom?
You're a Belgian journalist, so I guess you're neutral. Can you be neutral in France?
Yeah, you can be neutral. You can be well. You can try to be as objective as possible, and let both sides of us, or show both sides of a story, or even if there were 3 or 4 sides to a story, just try to show them all, and people can make up their own opinion. You can, of course, I have my feelings and I have my opinions, and I'm not very fond of people shooting children in the streets. But that's so obvious that you don't have to tell that kind of things. Just tell the story, tell what you see. No, no. No, because I don't think I have a beautiful voice, but I tend to write rather fast, and I think that's because I developed that technique of just not checking my notes every time, but just at the end of the story, just to see if I got it, if it's in my notes, just like I have it in my mind. Yeah, I do that in my head. I think I'm crazy enough to do it in my head. I think, but no, I don't read it aloud. No. I check quotes from people. That I do. I use my notes to check things, to check names, to check quotes. But if you check all the time and you're looking at your notes while you're writing your article, it slows you down, and you get distracted by the things you wrote before. That's why I do it that way. Know the language of the country you're working in. I think I know. And I don't want to insult you, but I know BBC reporters in Paris who don't speak French. I always think that's very strange. Yeah, yeah, but on the other hand, the BBC has the money to have 3 translators for 1 journalist. So, but I can't afford that. So that's a problem. Go on the road. As much as you can. Don't stay in your bureau. And there's a story everywhere, I think, but that's not for a correspondent alone. That's wherever you are. There are stories everywhere.
Thank you very much, Dirk.